You're live, man.
Hello?
You're live.
Live streaming, all right. Want to start out talking about natural law. We talk about natural law, the laws of nature and of nature's God. That is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. What are they referring to there? I believe that they are referring to, our natural rights. Rights that belong to us before there was any written law. You see, written law is only an instrument to try to capture what natural law already is. Natural law is what God gave us. God gave us dominion over this earth. As we learn in Genesis at the beginning of time, that He created the earth and He commanded us to, and gave us the opportunity to till and take care of it, to multiply and replenish upon it, and to have dominion over the plants and the animals. God gave us the right to own and control this land and its resources. And everything we have, the clothes you wear, the car you drove here in, the phones you're filming this thing on, everything we have comes from the earth. Everything we have comes from the earth. And God intended on us to be able to live happily by utilizing these things. And He did not give that to a government. He did not give that to a collective. He gave that to individuals. So I want to say that the land and the resources belong to the individual. No level of government. So let's talk about, who has the right then to utilize these things? Whose right is it to be able to graze grass in this area or use the water in that area? Natural law, again, God's law, determines how that's to be so that we don't have to fight about it. So let's talk about rights. How are rights established? Okay. Any ideas on who has the first, how a right is established? Rights can't?
Government gives it to us, right?
Government can't own the rights, and even so, okay, so rights are established. The first principle is prior appropriation. I'll spell it wrong, so I'll just stop right there. Prior appropriation, which is the thought of first in right, or first in time, first in right. Okay. In other words, you get there first. You establish a right. But getting there first is not enough. Okay, the other part of this is beneficial use. Okay, which is the doctrine of use it or lose it. Okay. Okay, this is how rights are established. Okay, let's think about this for a minute. Most every state, or at least in the West here, has water right laws. Okay, the water right laws. If you look on the water registry, what are two of the most important information on the water registry? You guys know?
Adjudicated. Right.
Okay, the adjudication, which would kind of indicate how much water there is there. Okay, but it has your name on it, doesn't it? Okay, so your name, it says you're there, and it has a priority date. And when it comes down to, okay, which water right has greater value or is the claim is by the date. If they're going to have to scale back on the water right for one reason or another, the one that is oldest has highest priority, and the newer ones are the ones that would be at risk. Okay, and then you have to prove up on that water. If you have to beneficially use it, if you're not using that water for a beneficial purpose, you're not using it at all, then somebody else should be able to use that water. Okay, and so you have to prove up. But you know what? This applies to other types of rights too. Really, all rights, not just water rights or grazing rights, but all rights. My brother Ammon, the one that he also owns a fleet maintenance business, diesel mechanic shop, and he saw some inefficiencies in his business and tried, so he's like, he gotta do something a little different. And he had some ideas, and so he began to develop this software and this program on the software to better manage his business. And but they were his ideas. They were his ideas. And then he beneficially put them to use, and now he's using it in his business. And his productivity went way up. His costs went way down, and so he can see that that's a benefit to him. So now he has, he's going to patent that, and it'll be valuable. It is already valuable to him, but it'll also be valuable to sell or to trade later on. And so it's not just water rights, and it's not just grazing rights, but all rights are established this way. Anyway, once a right becomes valuable because you put some hard labor into it and you've made it worth something, now that right can be transferred if you want to. Okay, so what are some ways that rights can be transferred?
So transfer just literally transfer some property to children.
Heirship.
Okay, so
Gifting.
Inheritance.
Inheritance or gifting.
Sold, trade, barter. What's another way?
Taken.
Okay. It can be taken or stolen. Okay, but one other thing we want to talk in there is adverse possession. Okay, now good people don't do that. So we don't think about it all the time. But adverse possession isn't always depending. These are definitely adverse. But there are positive aspects to adverse possession. And every state, as far as I know, in the Union has adverse possession laws. And they're there to help protect these rights in a lot of cases, actually. Okay. An example might be is if you purchased the house and you paid for it, you lived there for so long, but then somebody, down the road going through their attic or grandma's old ship treasure chest or whatever you want to call it, and they pull up a deed and it looks clean and it seems clean and it's a deed to the house that you're living in, and they come down the road and say, hey, this is my house, and you say, no, it's not. No, it's not. Because, number one, I'm the one here making beneficial use of it. And number two, again, these adverse possession laws, I know each state has a different time on this. I know here in Oregon it's 7 years. I know Nevada it's only 5.
California's 5.
And California's 5.
Oregon's
So if
7.
you possess a property or for more than the 5 years and it's never contested, then you can rightfully own it.
There's some other laws or other conditions that.
True, there are other conditions to that, but they can be a protective function for that. Now, so you have rights; they're established. These rights are valuable. They can be transferred because they have value. And so, next step is how do you maintain these rights? Okay. For a right to continue, for a right to exist, you have to maintain it. Okay. The first part of that is that you have to claim that right. You got to put your name on it. Okay. You've got to continually use that right. the last one.
Defend.
You gotta defend it. You gotta defend it. Okay, now, let's put this thing to the test. See if this is not natural law. We've all waited in line before, have we not? Started out when we were kids in elementary school, at one time or another, and probably way too many times than what we like, we've had to wait in line. So let's say this is the item we're waiting in line for. And these are the people waiting in line. And you know, I think that this is probably pretty common knowledge, isn't it? Did anyone take like a waiting in one line in class 101 in elementary? You know, do you think waiting in line is the same in Europe or Asia or Africa, any different than what it is here? You know, I haven't been to all those places, so maybe I don't really know, but I would bet that a waiting in line is pretty much just common knowledge. It's just natural. Okay? This person here, why is that his place?
Because he was first there.
Okay, he was the first one there to make prior appropriation. All right, and as long as he remains there, that'll be his place. And number 2, and number 3, and number 4, and number 5, and so on. Okay, they have their places there because because of their first in time, first in right, their prior appropriation. And as long as they continue to stay in those places and make beneficial use of it, then it's there. And then it's there. Okay? If depending on what we're waiting for, you know, the value thereof, it might make this position more valuable. Okay? But could he sell or trade that spot?
Absolutely.
Okay? He could give it away if he wants. Okay? And it could also be taken through adverse possession. Let's talk about maintaining that then, to prevent that adverse possession. Okay, if he didn't claim his spot, then he really doesn't have it, right? If he discontinued to use it, let's say he needed to go to the bathroom somewhere and left that spot, would that spot still be his?
No.
Okay. You know what could be? He could ask number 2, hey, will you save my spot? You can hold this for me. You know, number 2 says, yeah, I'll respect that. I'll hold it for you. But you know, if he went to the bathroom, he's gone for a couple of minutes, and then he's decided he's hungry. He's like, oh, I'm going to go eat lunch too. He's holding my spot. Okay, but that save spot kind of wears out after a while, doesn't it? Okay, it don't last all that long, so you really got to continue to use it. All right, well, let's talk about, let's say this is us down here in position 4. And here comes a guy, and he's like 350 pounds, 6'5", and he comes and steps right in front of you. All right, now, if you're going to maintain your right, what do you have to do?
Defend your spot.
Okay, well, what if it's just lunch? What if, you know, it's really not that big a deal, you're going to get your lunch anyway. In other words, depending on what right this is that you're waiting for, what this thing, I guess your rightful spot are these positions, but depends on what you're waiting for, you might have to make a decision as to the level that you're going to defend.
That would come into how much do you value your position.
There you go. Exactly. How much do you value your position? Okay? And that makes a huge difference. Again, what did my dad say when it comes to our rights? He said, I'll do whatever it takes. In other words, this level had no limit. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Okay? So now, he's 350, 6'5", and you're, 150, 5'9". What's it going to take? You might just say, hey, sir, that's not right. Better than that. That might be all it takes. It might be all it takes. You know what? He might honor that and go back. But if he doesn't, then you might have to step it up a notch. Okay? And if it comes all the way down to the point where you're either going to have to throw him out yourself, or it ain't going to happen, and you're just not physically capable of doing that, okay? Again, you're going to defend that spot. I mean, he's now claimed it. He's now using it. Okay, in other words, he's taken adverse possession over it. Okay, and natural law says the longer that he's there, the more his right becomes established. Okay? And if you don't do something about it quickly, I mean, if you wait 30 minutes or even 5 maybe, you know, then his right becomes established and yours has been moved down. In fact, even as new people add to the line, you know, they didn't see him jump in line there in front of you, and so now if you kick him out, you know, they're going to say, wait a second, it appears that he was there, what are you doing throwing a fit? You know, they didn't witness that. So can you see how the lack of defense, you know, allows that adverse possession, because he's now claiming he's now using it because you didn't defend it. If you fail on any one of these three, you lose your right. You have to maintain all three. Okay, so what are you going to do? He's physically bigger than you. You maybe have already done a few levels and it's been unsuccessful. What do you do?
Get 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. Try to pull.
All right. Okay. All right. See,
Coalition.
all right. 4, 5, 6, and on down the line. They've also lost their position because of him. And quite frankly, even though 1, 2, and 3 did not, they understand waiting in line 101. Okay, so they might. I'm going to leave those guys that come out late. They weren't here yet. They might all join you in
expelling.
him. All right. What do we call that group right there?
Coalition, country, state, community.
Okay, all of those are right. All of those are right. That's government.
Protecting the rights of the
Individual.
And that's right. What is the purpose of government? The purpose of government is to assist the individual in maintaining their rights. To assist the individual in claiming, using, and defending their rights. Okay. Let's go to the Declaration of Independence. Our founding fathers understood this. Our founding fathers understood this, and they put it in that declaration. Second paragraph, it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men." That's the purpose of government. Okay? Government's purpose is to assist the individual in maintaining their rights. Okay, so in this case, you know, you get him ousted out, you know, the government fulfilled its purpose, and it can dissolve at that point. No longer needed. Okay. But this happens way too often. Okay, happens way too often. And so our founding fathers again knew that, and so they set up a system of government to kind of be in place to readily be there, to readily assist us and readily defend, to help us defend. Okay, so I'm gonna start out over here again. This is you and I. This is an individual. Okay, and he has his rights, God-given, or those that he established. You know, some of the God-given rights are our life, our liberty, pursuit of happiness. Okay, these are rights that every man and woman hold. And then other rights that we establish, like a water right, or a grazing right, or rights of something else you built, like my brother's program. Okay, we hold all those rights. And each one of us are a government unto ourselves. We have the responsibility to self-govern us. We've been taught by our parents, by our churches, that we should make right choices, that we should, we don't steal because we know it's wrong. We can govern ourselves in that. We don't have to have someone tell us to do these things because we are our own. However, in the case of this guy here, he wasn't strong enough to completely defend himself, and so we have some levels of government, some shields, so to speak. And the first shield would be our county. And the second shield would be our state. And the third shield is our federal government. Each one of these governments has the exact same duty or purpose to assist the individual. Remember, the rights belong to the individual. They don't belong to any level of government. The governments are simply shields to help the individual claim, use, and defend their rights. Okay? How does the county help fulfill this purpose?
Like the county sheriff.
Okay, the county sheriff's there, and he's supposed to help defend the rights of the individual. Okay, what about the county recorder's office? Okay, as we claim our rights and use them, we make beneficial use of them and so forth, we can record those rights in the county office. That's where our property, our deeds are. Okay, all of those things. The deed is not what gives you right to your property. The deed is an instrument of documentation that helps you claim it. And so if anyone else comes in and tries to claim your property, you can say, wait a second, I got a claim to this, I got a deed, it's recorded down at the county office. Okay, and so the county is doing its purpose in assisting the individual in maintaining their rights. How does the county help you use your rights? Okay, think about our roads. I mean, we've all got properties. Wouldn't it be pretty tough to get there if we didn't have nice roads? Okay. So in that instance, they're helping us use by helping us access them. And of course, we already mentioned the county sheriff. He's there to help us defend when, he can be a ready government that's already there, ready to help us when somebody comes in and tries to bully their way. Again, our founding fathers understood this. And they understood that the rights belong to the individual. That government closest to the people is our closest defense and should be where most things take place. The state is also there to help and aid in those things. But they saw a need that if we had a federal government, a central government, we can give them specific duties to be a shield. And the duties our founding fathers gave to them was to repel the bullies of the outside world. That's why they've been given. They're in charge of national defense. They're in charge with international relations, foreign trade. Okay? Because that's their level of defense. In fact, if you read down through the powers that we give the federal government, they pretty much all kind of point to that direction. Okay? And the states are there to help defend and to repel federal overreach. And the county is supposed to keep the state at bay. And we are supposed to keep our county in check. But you know what? We can do that. It's close enough that we can, rub shoulders with our county sheriff, rub shoulders with our county commissioners. They're close enough to us that we can influence. The further this goes away, the less influence we have on people. And that's why, our rights are not, our individual rights are most protected right here close at home. need to get my narrative down better, and maybe my brother can do it when he gets here. But there are purposes for which the feds can make sure that there's not conflicts between the states. Okay, and both the state and the Fed are supposed to protect the individual from other individuals. Anyway, like I said, I need to get my narrative on that a little better, so I'll withhold on that. Anyway, so let's back up. Let's go and talk about land. This is a land issue we've been having here, because we feel that our rights are being violated because of the land issue, the land and the resources. So now again, our founding fathers understood this. They had just fought and freed themselves from a tyrannical monster, the Great Britain, and they weren't about to create another monster like they just freed themselves from. Okay, no way. And so to do that, they did not want the federal government to own large tracts of land. So there's two types of land that make up the United States. This is a land body here, and this is the other type of land body. What are those two types of lands in our country?
Private, public, state.
Okay, I always get that answer.
Wow.
No, I'm glad you bring it up, but it's wrong. It's not private and public. State, and what else?
Private.
No. This is just land mentioned in the Constitution. There you go. Territories. Territory and state. Okay. Those are the only two types of land mentioned in the United States Constitution. Okay. So let's talk about this a little bit. That's my feeble expression of the United States. Texas got a little bit weird now.
Well, they've always been a little bit weird.
Okay. The original 13 colonies, when they gained their independence and became states, there was a treaty signed, the Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Paris is the treaty that officially ended the Revolutionary War and was the peace treaty that ended that. They called it the Treaty of Paris because it was first signed in Paris. Took a process, they had to bring it over, and before they got all the states to sign it. But we learned a lot from that treaty, because that treaty talks about the qualities of a state, and it's important. I'd like to ask, how many states signed that treaty?
I would assume all 13, but.
Okay, all right.
On the Confederacy.
Okay. This treaty didn't do any form of the Confederacy. There was actually 14 states that signed the treaty. Okay, 14 states, but there's only 13 original states, so who was the 14th? Didn't exist at that time. Question? Okay, it was the state of Great Britain.
Oh.
Okay, all right. Now, the terminology there is important because the state of Great Britain, and now these are the original 13 states. Each one had their own individual name. They each signed it. They all signed it. It wasn't two signatures. It wasn't Great Britain and the United States of America, because the United States of America really didn't exist at that time. They were each separate and individual states. The definition of state is the same as the definition of a nation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And now they were all signed, 14 of them, and it states in there that they were equal and sovereign. Okay? Now you got to realize that at this time in history, Great Britain was the the greatest nation in the world. They had more land acquisitions, and they had more armies, and they had, they were the major power in the world. And now each one of these original 13 states is equal to Great Britain in the standing of the world. That's a pretty big deal, isn't it? All right, pretty big deal. And so that Treaty of Paris, if nothing else, proves that they were separate and equal and with Great Britain. Now, they always had intentions of joining together, and they did under the Articles of Confederation, and later under the Constitution of the United States. Okay, but we call it the United States. Okay, we didn't call it the monarchy, or we didn't call it totalitarian, we didn't call it the nation. Okay, it's the Union. Union, by definition, is more than one. You can't just be united with yourself. There has to be several parties involved, and they often refer to it as the several states. Okay, so this union joined together, not totally, but for particular purposes. That each state was still separate and individual in all the other aspects. Okay, the purposes for which we are united are in here. And okay, now there was some land over here that a lot of these original 13 states had claim to, west of the Allegheny Mountains, but it was largely unpopulated, and largely they didn't really have a lot of control with it. And besides, the Congress had, accumulated lots of debt that they needed to pay after the Revolutionary War, and so these states voluntarily relinquished those lands and let the new Union, the Congress, have control over those, and we call those the Northwest Territories. And in those Northwest Territories, the process for what happened to them next set precedent, so to speak, of how territories would be handled. But more so than that, our founding fathers put the rules for which Congress must deal with those territories. Okay? And those rules are found in Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. And it outlines that in section, let's see, Article 4, 3, Clause 2. It says, Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territories. Okay. Now, before I go any further than that, I want to talk about the Constitution. I want to talk about all government. Okay, because what is government again? Government is nothing more than us. We are the government. Government doesn't exist except for it's us joining together. Government alone has no power, has no authority. It only has what power and authority we give it. And we can't give it any authority or power that we didn't already individually possess. Okay? And so we give each one of these governments certain specific duties to do. And so we give this government certain things to do. And this Constitution is what lays that out. This Constitution is what creates that federal government. This Constitution, in this Constitution, we tell it what duties it can do. And in this Constitution, we give it the power to do those duties, to fulfill those duties. And if we didn't give it to it in this Constitution, then they don't have it. And the 10th Amendment calls that out pretty clear. Just read it. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. Laying it out clear. We didn't give it to you, it's still ours. Okay? And then the other thing we said in Article 6 of the Constitution, it said, this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land. Okay, So no other law can supersede this. All right, so now, let's go back here. We give Congress the power to dispose of the territory. Is there anywhere in here that we give the power to Congress to retain? No. Okay, so if they have the power to dispose, but don't have the power to retain, then that must mean they absolutely have to dispose of it. Okay? Now, they can make the rules and regulations while it's a territory, but we know that's going to be temporary because they have to dispose of it. They have to dispose of it. Okay? So how might they dispose of territorial land? What are some of the ways they can do that?
Sell it to another nation.
Okay. Well, they can sell it. I don't know if they've ever sold it to another nation.
Well, they could sell it. But,
Okay. And they did. You know, they sold a lot of this land, and again, to pay for the debt that they had incurred. Okay, let's just try. What are some other ways?
They give it away.
Okay, they give it away. You got any examples?
Homestead Act.
There you go. Homestead Act. They just give it away. And you know what? In doing that, they were helping people to claim it, you know, and encouraging them to go out and use it. They were fulfilling their purpose again. Well, that'd be nice if we can see them do that today, huh? Okay. What, however, though, is there any other ways? Can you think of any other ways that might?
The residents of that land could petition to become a state.
All right. The ultimate tool of disposal is statehood. Okay. Once these areas become populated enough, once they, you know, their economy became strong enough, that they can now become their own entity, their own state, their own nation, they can petition Congress through, you know, and create an enabling act and petition Congress to become a state. And once they become a state, they become equal to one of the original 13 states. Okay. Equal in every aspect. Equal to the original 13 states, who were also equal with Great Britain, who Great Britain was the greatest nation in the country at that time. And so each new state becomes equal to Great Britain. Equal in standing with any other nation in the world. Okay, let me ask you this. When the Revolutionary War ended, Great Britain left, how much of the land in each state did Great Britain retain? None. Who would have even thought of that, right? No way. Okay? There's no way. Okay? And our founding fathers, again, understood and knew that those who control the land and the resources control the wealth and the ability for a person to pursue happiness. They understood that these things are God-given, that God intended for these things to belong to the individual. And so to prevent any one group or government from obtaining large amounts of the land and resources, it has to be kept in the hands of the individual. And so that's why they did not allow the federal government to own, to retain these lands. Okay, so now let's talk about statehood. Okay, it mentions in Article 4.3.2 that they can make the needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. So there must be some other place that the United States can own property. So, and we do find that. We do find that. We find it in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Okay? So now let's go back to the purposes here. Well, let me back up here. Let's start here again. It says, in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, it says, Congress shall have power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such a district not exceeding 10 miles square as may, by session of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States. Okay, so what did they just do there? What did our founding fathers just create there?
A district. of Columbia.
That's right, okay? A 10-mile square, actually it's a, yeah, 10-mile square. So it's 10 miles by 10 miles, it's actually 100 square miles. Okay, and they said this would be the seat of government. They knew that if they created this federal government and gave it certain duties to do, it needed a place to function from. Okay? But you know what, that land didn't just come out of thin air, it didn't just come out of the ocean. It had to come from somewhere.
It was seeded by the states.
It was ceded by the state, by cession of the particular states. And I understand, I'm not exactly sure how the lay of the land is there, but I understand that it come out of parts of 4 states. Okay, so not one had to give up all their land type of deal.
Virginia, Maryland, it's right above Maryland.
Gotcha. And, you know, so those,
Maryland.
so those states agreed, they ceded that to them. And Congress accepted it, so it became the seat of government. And you know what? We give them exclusive legislation, exclusive, which means those states now no longer have any control or power over that land. Congress has exclusive legislation over that. Okay? But again, our founding fathers knew that they were going to need a little bit more land than just a home base to operate out of. But we knew that we give them responsibilities for military purposes. And so they're going to need a little bit more than that. So let's see what it says here. It says, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Okay, so for them to own land in a state, they have to, 1, get state legislature's consent. 2, they have to purchase it. Again, I'm terrible speller. And 3rd, they can only use it for forts, arsenals, magazines, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Okay? So if they needed a dockyard down here to stage their Navy from, or a magazine here to store their ammunition, or a fort here, or some other needful building to fulfill their purpose, and they needed those little spots, they can petition the state legislature. The state legislature can give their consent. Then they had to purchase it from the rightful owner. But that's all. Again, the federal government does not have constitutional authority to do anything else but these few things. And so when we talk about the lands in the West here, what right do they have to own these lands? The Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service.
0.
It's none. It's not federal land. As soon as these lands became states, then that transfer automatically took place. Now they would like us to believe that it's still a territory, and that they can still make all the rules and regulations, and that is how they are trying to treat it. But we're not territories any longer. We are states. You know, I know that there are some who are trying to get the lands transferred still. And, you know, their efforts might be worthy, but we say that doesn't need to happen. We say the transfer has already happened. According to the Constitution, it's already happened. Okay. No need to waste our efforts on that. So then the other question is how then can the federal government have control over us and our ranches? Okay, again, we've been buffaloed into believing that, you know, we've forgotten that our ancestors have rights. We've forgotten that our ancestors came here and they've grazed this land and they've used the water and they've created these rights. And throughout time they've been sold and traded, and maybe even we've inherited some of them. Okay. But you know what? Our federal government also understands natural law. And they also understand adverse possession. And so what they've done is they've come in here and they put their signs on it and claimed it. And then they tend to use it by saying they're leasing it back to us or giving us a permit to allow it to get us to use it. And they are willing to defend it, as we saw down there in 2014. Okay. But our written law, our founding fathers, didn't allow for that. And natural law that our Creator gave us also doesn't allow for that. And so for the only way for us to get back to where we're supposed to be is that if we reclaim and we begin to use it as our own, because it truly is, not as a renter. And then we'll have to be willing to stand and defend it. And my father said, whatever it takes. Because if you draw a line in the sand and say that's only as far as you go, I'm sure they're going to push you over. Okay. So now, back to how do they have control over us right now? Okay. We have these little things called contracts. Get the BLM and Sydney up here. Okay, and these contracts have certain terms and conditions, and we read through them. And when we sign our name to the bottom, that says we agree to those things. Okay? The water and the forage already belongs to us, and we're already using it. But when we sign a contract, we're agreeing to those terms and conditions, whatever they might be. And then if we break those terms and conditions, we end up in federal court. And that's part of the deal. I'm going back into some of that stuff I missed earlier about how this defense and court system is supposed to work. And I can tell you what, it doesn't work when we go to a federal court. Because what ends up happening there is they claim it's federal land, and they arrest you with a federal ranger, and they take you into a federal court with a federal judge using federal codes. How likely is it that you're going to win a case like that?
Not much.
Not much. Okay. It's kind of like if some man came into your house and abused your wife and children, and you said, hey, you know, this ain't going to happen. I'm going to take him to court. So you go to court and to get justice, and you get in there, and they say, all rise for the honorable judge, and the guy puts on the black robe and sits up at the bench, and he's the very man that abused your wife and children.
Yep.
You're not going to win that. Okay? So the only way to get out of underneath that is to not sign that contract. And if you have one, get rid of it. Because your water rights, it's on your range, you know, they're protected under state law. And your grazing rights are yours. So the only way you're going to get out of underneath that thumb is that, again, you've got to maintain them. You've got to put your name on them. You've got to use them as though your own. And you've got to defend them. And when you don't have a county sheriff that will help you, then you've got to call on your neighbors to help you. And that's, quite frankly, what this militia has done for us. When all else failed, and many of you guys know how it was down there for us. Maybe you don't. But we had, 200 armed agents, and they had all the latest and the greatest materials and equipment. And they literally laid siege upon us and put surveillance equipment, high-tech sound and sonar or whatever they used to be able to listen to us in our house through our walls from quarter mile away. And they put snipers on the hills, watching us, keeping track of us. Good dogs let us know where they were. And they closed off all the roads. And our county sheriff said he wasn't going to help us. And at one point we needed 911 help, and my sister called 911, and 911 told us to hang up and not call back if they weren't there. And the state highway patrol people, they drove circles around the area, but then when we were attacked, they all disappeared for some reason. That's a pretty alone feeling. Okay, here we are, little ranch family, and we have all this power and might on top of us. And then, Ryan Payne. He's a member of the militias. He called me up, I don't know how he got my number. He says, I'm in Montana. He says, but I'll drive all night and I'll be there in the morning. And he began to gather others that were willing to help. And of course we started to make some noise, and before you know it, we had 3,000 people there saying, no, Mr. Boy, it ain't gonna happen. Not gonna happen. And I don't think it'll ever come to that again. I hope not. Hopefully we can have county sheriffs and county commissioners and state governors and so forth that will start doing their job and repelling. Do you know that these government levels are not supposed to be friends? You know, they're supposed to be just a little bit at enmity with one another. That way when one gets out of line, the other one can pop them in the jaw and say, straighten up. Again, back to this federal court, you see how they join all three branches of government together. They are the executive. They become the legislative, making their own codes and regulations. And they become their own judges. Okay, and again, that's un-American because our founding fathers broke those three up. And again, those three branches of government, they're not supposed to be friends with each other either. They're supposed to keep each other in check. And when all three branches of government fail, then it falls back to what some say is the fourth branch of government, which is, no, the people. The bureaucracy is an illegitimate form of government. And yes, it does exist, but it's okay. The only way when it gets to this point is just to simply say no and stand on your own too. Cancel these contracts. Then you can stand on your constitutional rights. I may not have done the best job in that presentation, but what questions do you have?